In the hall where silence wore golden crowns, he entered, and the tables began to tremble, not with fear, but with truth. I walked into a room of polished names, where pride wore linen and whispered fame. Seats of honor, games of kings, but every heart hid sharper things. Then the silence split the sacred air, like ancient winds through temple stairs. A presence came, no need for crown, and every high place fell down. He said, why do you chase the higher seat when love is calling from the streets? The broken ones, the ones unseen, are closer to the eternal King. This is the King's beautiful banquet, where the last become the first in it. No throne made by human hands can take it. Grace is the seat, you don't have to fake it. Lift your soul, let the pride fall down. Reggae fire in the holy sound, Afrobeat hearts and gospel crown. The King is here, turning tables around. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. I saw a man with broken skin, left outside where hope grew thin, but the King just turned his face and mercy stepped into that place. No silver room, no status law, could stop the love that heaven saw. One touch, one...
Imagine, right, that you're at the most exclusive dinner party in the entire city.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and the VIPs are like practically elbowing each other for the best seats. The tension in the room is just suffocating. And then the guest of honor intentionally breaks the law right in front of the host.
That's a terrible dinner party.
Right. But today, we are taking a deep dive into a text where Jesus didn't just ruin a dinner party. He basically completely bankrupted the human economy of status.
He really did. Since you follow this space, you probably already know we're dealing with Luke chapter 14.
Oh, for sure.
But our mission today is to really map out what the source material identifies as the salvation matrix.
The salvation matrix. I mean, it sounds like a sci-fi concept, right?
It kind of does, yeah.
But the document uses it to describe this incredibly high-stakes convergence of, well, divine fidelity and human response.
Exactly.
We are exploring a space where grace is entirely free, but it demands the absolute total surrender of self-sovereignty.
Which is really the core tension we're going to be navigating today. Because this is an economy of grace that just aggressively flips human ranking upside down.
Totally. And I think we need to look at the mechanics of the opening scene.
Yeah.
Because this theater of restoration, as the document calls it, it starts in a deeply hostile environment.
Oh, incredibly hostile.
It's the Sabbath. Jesus is at the house of a prominent Pharisee. And Stephanie made this brilliant observation in the community discussion transcript.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, she pointed out that the crowd isn't gathered around Jesus to, take notes or learn from his wisdom.
Not at all. They are watching him to spring a trap. I mean, it is an interrogation that's just thinly disguised as a dinner invitation. They're waiting for him to make a theological misstep. And right there, placed in front of him almost as bait, is a man suffering from dropsy.
Which is a really painful condition, right? It involves severe swelling.
Right, exactly. So Jesus turns to the religious elite and asks a devastatingly simple question. He says, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?"
And they refuse to answer.
A little silence.
They're weaponizing their silence.
Yeah.
Because they know if they say yes, they lose their strict religious superiority.
Yeah.
But if they say no, they look utterly heartless in front of the entire crowd.
So Jesus just bypasses their political game entirely and heals the man anyway.
Wow.
And by doing that, he actively dismantles their performative purity. Which, brings us to a core concept from the teaching document.
Okay, let's hear it.
For Jesus, the Sabbath is a theater for restoration, not a boundary for exclusion.
A theater for restoration. I love that.
Right. The religious elite had essentially engineered the Sabbath into offense. It was a tool to keep the unclean out and, to maintain their own elevated status.
Yeah, a boundary.
But Jesus turns that boundary into a public stage to demonstrate what the mercy of God actually looks like in practice.
Because Jesus just proved that human boundaries, like the Sabbath rules they made up, are basically illusions. And that completely changes the math of the room.
Oh, absolutely it does.
Suddenly the guests scrambling for the best seats isn't just rude, it's a desperate attempt to cling to a status economy that Jesus just utterly bankrupted.
Exactly. He's watching these VIPs subtly, or, well, maybe not so subtly, jockeying for the seats closest to the host.
It's so awkward to picture. Like in the community discussion, Abayola and Judah shared these perfectly relatable stories of navigating seating arrangements at modern networking parties.
Oh, right. The awkward seating moment.
Yes, like being asked to move because you accidentally sat in a spot reserved for someone, quote unquote, more important. I mean, that is a universally humiliating experience.
It really is. It's the anxiety of the human condition on full display. And Jesus addresses this directly by introducing what the text calls the downward flow of honor. Right.
He tells the room, hey, when you're invited to a banquet, do not take the place of honor. Deliberately seek out the least important place.
It's totally countercultural.
Exactly. In kingdom logic, status is gained exclusively by moving downward.
But, I love that the community didn't just blindly nod along to this. Kumai actually pushed back, and he brought this real-world weight to the conversation.
Yeah, his point was so important.
He shared his experience as a Black executive who has had to break through massive systemic barriers just to step into high-level leadership roles.
Right.
And his question was incredibly sharp. He asked, does taking the lowest seat mean we should be insecure? If he walks into a boardroom, is he supposed to hide his title or pretend he hasn't earned his position?
And that nuance is just crucial. The downward flow of honor has absolutely nothing to do with false humility or insecurity.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, Jesus is not asking you to pretend you don't possess the skills or the position you have rightfully earned. It's about acknowledging the ultimate source of your honor.
Ah, I see. In the kingdom, human ranking is a delusion. So choosing the lowest seat is a deliberate surrender of your right to define your own worth based on, who is sitting next to you.
Wow. So you don't have to scramble for a seat because the king has already secured your place.
Precisely. You are resting in the absolute confidence that God validates you.
Which means Jesus isn't just giving them a new set of, dinner party etiquette rules. He's actually pulling from a much older, ancient blueprint.
Yes.
The source material refers to these as scriptural echoes.
Right. And the first major echo here is from Proverbs chapter 21, verses 6 and 7. Jesus is directly pulling from the wisdom literature that warns against honoring yourself before the king.
Okay.
Proverbs explicitly states that it is far better for the king to look at you and say, come up here, than for you to be publicly humiliated because you presumed you belonged in the VIP section.
Yeah, that makes sense.
True honor requires the patience to wait for the king's invitation.
But then Jesus takes that proverb and pushes it into territory that must have just deeply offended the host.
Oh, completely.
He looks at the Pharisee who invited him, right? And he says, next time you throw a banquet, don't invite your rich friends, your brothers, or your wealthy neighbors who can pay you back. Invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind.
Yeah. And this is where the theology becomes, frankly, radioactive to a first century religious elite.
Radioactive is a great word for it.
Because that specific list of people, the crippled, the lame, the blind, it's a direct contrast to the ancient laws found in Leviticus 21.
Verses 17 through 19, right?
Exactly. Leviticus explicitly stated that any man with a physical flaw was strictly forbidden from approaching to present the food of his God.
Wow.
The law created this definitive boundary that excluded them from the inner workings of the divine presence.
And Jesus brings them right to the center of the table.
He does.
He's establishing what the document beautifully terms a priesthood of the broken.
He is. And the document emphasizes that this is a promise fulfillment dynamic.
Okay, I need you to explain that mechanism a bit more. How does bringing physically broken people to a dinner table fulfill an ancient promise?
Right, so it goes back to the purpose of the Old Covenant versus the New Covenant. The Old Law used physical perfection as a sort of metaphor for divine holiness.
Okay, I follow.
But the prophets, like Isaiah, they promised a future kingdom where the eyes of the blind would be opened and the lame would leap.
Oh, wow.
So Jesus isn't just ignoring Leviticus. He is declaring that the promised kingdom has actually arrived.
That is massive.
Right. He is fulfilling the ultimate purpose of the law by healing and inviting the exact people the old system barred.
And Anthony highlighted this perfectly in the community chat. He said this is about extending radical hospitality to the marginalized without expecting any earthly return on investment.
Exactly. No return on investment at all.
Which completely destroys the ancient economy of favors.
Yeah.
I mean, if you only invite people who have physical flaws and zero financial resources, the networking potential of your dinner party drops to absolute zero.
Oh, yeah. It's completely gone.
It's like trying to hold on to a handful of dirty copper pennies when someone is trying to hand you solid gold bars. You literally have to drop your own currency to accept the king's.
That's a great way to put it.
Because the only currency accepted at this beautiful banquet is an utter inability to repay.
And that is the empty hands motif the document talks about. The king trades exclusively in grace.
Grace? Yeah.
You can only receive that gift if your hands are completely empty of your own merits, your own status, and, your own ability to leverage a favor.
But the narrative takes a really tragic turn right here.
It really does.
Because Jesus tells the parable of the great banquet. A master prepares this massive, lavish feast. He sends his servant out to tell the invited guests, "Come, everything is ready."
And
the room remains empty. I mean, if the invitation is so radically inclusive and the grace is entirely free, why does no one show up?
because of the anatomy of an excuse.
Oh, that's good.
The only thing keeping people out of this banquet are self-imposed barriers. The guests prioritize their private, self-sovereign enterprises over their loyalty to the king.
Let's actually examine these excuses because, on a human level, they sound entirely reasonable.
They really do sound reasonable at first.
Yeah. The first guest says, "I just bought a field, I have to go see it." The second says, "I bought 5 yoke of oxen, I need to test them." And the third says, "I just got married, I cannot come."
Now, Indu brought an incredible piece of historical context to this in the teaching session, highlighting another really profound scriptural echo.
Yeah, I loved this part.
Those 3 specific excuses, a new property, a new business venture with the oxen, and a new marriage, they are pulled directly from Deuteronomy chapter 20.
Verses 5 through 7.
Right. In the ancient law given by Moses, those were entirely valid, legally recognized exemptions to avoid fighting in an earthly war.
Wait, so these guests are actually quoting scripture to get out of the kingdom feast?
Exactly.
They are using religious law to justify their absence?
It is incredibly subversive. Moses gave those exemptions to protect the building blocks of early society, right? Homes, agriculture, families.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Inju pointed out the critical mechanism here. Those deferments applied exclusively to earthly human conflicts.
Right.
Jesus is making a massive authoritative claim. He's saying those historical exemptions absolutely do not apply when the king of the kingdom invites you to his victory feast.
Wow.
You do not get a deferment from the kingdom of God.
It's so fascinating that the document applies the Eisenhower priority matrix to a first-century text.
I know, it's such a cool connection.
But it perfectly diagnoses why these guests decline. The matrix divides tasks into urgent versus important, right?
Yeah.
And the guests in the parable suffered from the tyranny of the immediate. They took things that felt urgent in their daily lives and just miscategorized them as ultimate priorities.
They made a fatal error in categorization. They pursued the merely urgent and let it completely crowd out the infinitely important.
And Keeper brought this right down to earth in the community discussion. She admitted that her oxen aren't like literal farm animals.
Right, of course not.
It's doing the laundry or making breakfast for the kids. It's those mundane, immediate tasks that just scream for our attention and slowly calcify into spiritual barriers.
Yeah, the everyday stuff.
I immediately thought about smartphone notifications. Our brains are biologically wired to click the immediate ping.
Oh, absolutely.
A text message comes in, and suddenly it feels like the most urgent crisis in the universe, while the quiet, long-term survival of our soul gets put on hold indefinitely.
The pings of modern life are exactly what Jesus was warning about.
But I have to push back here on behalf of you, the listener.
Yeah.
Checking a text message or doing laundry is one thing.
Sure.
But a new marriage, a new business, those aren't trivial distractions. Those are fundamentally important aspects of human life. Are we really saying a marriage is just an excuse?
Well, they are deeply important in the earthly realm, yes. But the teaching makes a crucial distinction about the hierarchy of loyalty.
The hierarchy of loyalty.
Okay. Even objectively good and reasonable priorities become spiritual barriers when they eclipse the king. The banquet is the only truly ultimate matter.
Wow.
When those guests prioritize their property and their relationships over the king's invitation, it resulted in what the text calls a cold ontological erasure.
Wait, ontological erasure is an intensely heavy phrase. Are we just saying they lose their dinner reservation, or is the text implying they're being fundamentally deleted from the kingdom's reality?
It's the latter. The master of the banquet says, "Not one of those men who are invited will get a taste of my banquet."
Ooh.
It is a permanent deletion from the guest list. Their refusal to prioritize his reign results in their absolute exclusion from the reality of his kingdom. They chose their temporary fields, and so they lose the eternal estate.
Which perfectly sets up the massive tone shift that happens next.
Yes, it shifts gears so fast.
We move from verses 12 through 24, which detail this grand, lavish invitation, straight into verses 25 through 35, which the document titles, "The Road to Discipleship."
Right.
And suddenly, the warmth of the banquet hall is replaced by some of the most demanding, aggressive language in the historical record.
It really is a staggering shift. Jesus turns to the massive crowds traveling with him, and he essentially demands the surrender of self-sovereignty.
Yeah.
Following the king isn't a weekend hobby you just add to your current life. It is a total replacement of loyalties.
He literally turns to the crowd and says that if anyone comes to him and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be his disciple.
It's a shocking use of comparative language to make an absolute, non-negotiable point. Your kingdom identity must violently and completely supersede any tribal, familial, or racial identity.
There's no room for anything else.
Right. There can be no rival loyalties on the throne of your heart. You are actively transferring your allegiance from the kingdom of self to the reign of the king.
And he uses these incredibly pragmatic, cold metaphors to drive this home. He talks about a builder estimating the cost of a tower and a king calculating his troops before entering a war.
Yeah, the practical cost.
In the community reflections, OG shared a story that grounded this concept so well.
Oh, the building story. That was powerful.
Yeah, he talked about his uncle who started building a massive 30-room apartment complex in his village over 40 years ago. But his uncle never finished it because he didn't count the cost before laying the foundation.
Wow.
It just stood there for decades, this incomplete physical monument to poor planning. OG said that story forced him to look at his own faith and ask, am I actually going to finish this, or am I just laying a foundation I have absolutely no intention of completing?
And that is the exact functional pragmatism Jesus is demanding of his followers. Iodell offered a really profound reframe on the king going to war metaphor in the audio transcript, too.
What did Iodell say?
Well, we often treat counting the cost as if Jesus is handing us a multiple choice consumer survey, right? Like, hey, do you want to participate in this lifestyle? Is the commitment level okay for you?
Right, like it's a subscription service.
Exactly. But Iodell pointed out that this is not a negotiation. It is a matter of life and death.
Right, because if a king realizes his army of 10,000 is vastly outmatched by an approaching army of 20,000, he doesn't just casually decide to opt out of the war.
Exactly. He aggressively pursues terms of peace while the other army is still far off. Surrendering to Jesus isn't a lifestyle choice. It's the only survival strategy against an overwhelming force.
And Bill added a great visual to that concept. He said he has to keep a white flag ready in his mind at all times.
White flag, yes.
Because that surrender isn't just a one-time decision you make at an altar. You have to wave that white flag of surrender to God's authority over your schedule, your money, and your pride, like every single day.
Because the alternative to that daily surrender is what the text calls diluted discipleship.
Eluded discipleship.
Yeah. Jesus closes this section with the metaphor of salt. Disciples are salt, but they must maintain their sacrificial sting.
Oh, that's good.
Right. If salt loses its taste, its chemical bite, it is utterly useless. It can't even be used as fertilizer for the soil. It is just thrown out.
A sacrificial sting. That phrasing really sticks with me. It implies that following the king should actually cause a reaction in the environment around you.
Well, it has to sting because salt prevents decay. If your faith doesn't provide any preservation to the world, if it doesn't challenge the moral decay around it, it has lost its fundamental purpose.
Yeah.
Jesus is making it unequivocally clear. There are no halfway disciples. You either retain your sting or you are discarded.
Okay, I need to synthesize this because there is a massive glaring paradox here that we really have to address.
Let's do it.
Earlier, we established that this beautiful banquet is entirely free. The host bankrupts the economy of favors.
Yeah.
You literally buy your way in with empty hands. But now Jesus is saying the road to get to that banquet costs absolutely everything you have. How do those two realities coexist?
That is the ultimate tension of the salvation matrix. The grace itself is entirely free. You cannot purchase it, earn it, or network your way into it.
Okay.
But stepping into the kingdom requires the absolute deletion of your old self-serving empire. You have to drop everything you are holding on to.
Your status, your reasonable excuses.
Yes. Your tribal loyalties, your self-sovereignty, you drop all of that in order to have the empty hands required to receive the invitation.
Wow.
It costs you nothing to enter the banquet, but it costs you everything you used to be.
So what we are really looking at today is an ultimate mandate. This salvation matrix is radically, scandalously inclusive of the physically flawed, the broken, the people society pushes to the absolute margins.
Absolutely.
But it is aggressively, unapologetically exclusive of the self-serving, the proud, and the chronically busy.
The king demands that we invite those who cannot possibly repay us. And the teaching document summarizes the beauty of this logic perfectly. It says, "Their empty hands are God's receipt."
Their empty hands are God's receipt. That is a phrase that completely rewires how you view generosity and grace.
It really is.
But the document doesn't let us off the hook with just a beautiful poetic image. It closes the textual analysis with this incredibly sobering warning.
Yeah, this part is heavy.
Every excuse sounds reasonable until dinner is served without you.
It is the tragedy of the trivial. The great danger isn't that we outright reject the king. It's that we let our oxen, our fields, and our daily routines keep us out of the eternal feast.
So to you listening right now, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to really mull over.
Yeah, think about this.
We've talked about the tyranny of the immediate. We've talked about the constant pings and notifications of modern life. If the doors to this radical, beautiful banquet were to open in your living room right this very second, which specific, urgent notification on your phone, or which perfectly reasonable commitment on your schedule would you have to actively ignore to walk through it?
Lift your hands, let the system fall. Hear the trumpet, hear the
To the King who brought us all together.
Kingdom table welcomes
A beautiful banquet indeed.
No ladder high enough to reach his grace. No title strong enough to take his place. He lowers mountains, he raises the weak. The first are last, the proud grow meek. This is the King's beautiful banquet, where shame is healed and hearts are sacred. No one lost and no one wasted. Every soul is heaven gated. Dance, O earth, let the burden break. Gospel fire in the drum and bass. Afrobeat joy in holy space. The King is love, the King is grace. The King is grace. And the table stretched beyond sight until there was no higher and no lower, only him and us.
To the King who brought us all together.
In light.
A beautiful banquet indeed.